It's our mission to increase brain cancer survival and quality of life. To do this, we need new, effective treatments and get those treatments to patients as quickly as possible. Our Clinical Accelerator program has been designed to do exactly that. The Clinical Accelerator addresses a significant funding gap called the Valley of Death, whereby discoveries by researchers in the lab are often unable to translate into therapies for patients due to the lack of funding available. Did you know that it costs approximately $2.8 billion in drug discovery and development for one drug to reach FDA approval? At Cure Brain Cancer Foundation, we are committed to accelerate new treatments to our patients as quickly as possible. Our vision is to mirror the urgency of our community, people living with brain cancer who don't have a luxury of time. But don't just take my word for it. I had the opportunity to talk to renowned expert Professor John de Groot and Professor Patrick Wen in the United States about our Clinical Accelerator program and the significant need to support drug development in brain cancer.
I think in academics, a lot of emphasis on very early stage development with the idea that maybe what's being worked on will be taken up by somebody else in the future. It's not the idea that what they are working on is actually going to end up in a patient in the clinic. And so there's a bit of a disconnect and there's no straight line from one to the other. So I think this really fills a huge gap for investigators at all stages.
The huge area of need is early on in drug development. Learning whether these drugs get in across the blood-brain barrier into the tumor and screening out drugs that are not useful and finding the drugs that are helpful to bring them on to trials like GBM Agile.
The standard treatment regime for brain cancer has barely changed in 30 years, and survival has remained stagnant at 22% for that period. New treatments are urgently needed. The Clinical Accelerator program targets a crucial point in the drug and treatment development pathway. I spoke to Professor Web Cavenee on how the Clinical Accelerator aids researchers and biotech companies overcome the funding Valley of Death.
And the reason it's called the Valley of Death is because that's where the biotech companies go to die. So the investors don't want to put money in until they know it's not going to be toxic. Mm-hmm. And maybe they even want to know that it wasn't toxic in humans, which is even more expensive, but they at least want to know that. Correct. Most investors won't invest just on an idea. The ideas are mainly not coming from biotech. Mm-hmm. They could be, but they're mainly not. They're mainly coming from academics who have more freedom to think about things and to fail and to, where biotech is focused, right, on getting a result. And if they fail, they're in big trouble. That's where foundations play a big role. Mm-hmm. But foundations can't stop there, because if they do, then all the ideas will hit up against a wall and drop off the cliff. Mm-hmm. So unless they can get over that cliff, however far over the cliff they get, it's not going to get picked up to go farther. And the object of all of this is to get treatments into testing in patients and finally into something that's available to patients to help them with their disease.
The Clinical Accelerator aims to bridge that gap by supporting translational research from the laboratory into the clinic to ultimately progress new drugs and therapies past the Valley of Death. Our funding will act as leverage for researchers and industry partners so they can develop the necessary proof of concept data, which can then be used for securing larger, sophisticated investments and partnerships. This program will enable leading researchers to advance their pioneering ideas into clinical development and will support biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry partners to progress new, urgently needed treatments for brain cancer. I asked our Scientific Advisory Committee member, Professor John de Groot, for his advice to future applicants.
For next year, I think what we really are looking for are for concepts that are beyond the preclinical stage. We really want something that's been embedded in multiple animal models, but that work will be completed prior to the funding of the Clinical Accelerator grant. So we really want something that's ready to go and get into patients. So maybe there needs to be some IND enabling studies for actually getting approval by the regulatory agents to actually then get into the patients, or something that's already in that process and then can go directly into patients. So I think there's really, a lot of great ideas that are out there that are ready to get into the patients, but many times finding the money to actually do that is very, very difficult. So I think, again, this is filling a huge gap.